Welcome into the Four Verticals podcast here on this Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. This is the pre-show, if you will, the time of the show when we are waiting for some folks to come in. I've already put out the link to the Twitter, by the way. Speaking of Twitter, sure some of you have noticed we are verified. Finally on Twitter, so how about that? Finally verified, so... If you're wondering, that's a pretty significant change. But other than that, hopefully everyone's having a good day. We'll give folks here a couple of minutes here to trickle in, if you will. High top, a somewhat warm downtown Jacksonville, Florida. We have a big show for you guys today. A lot of things to cover, a lot of things to discuss, if you will. A lot of things happening. Of course, the big story sort of going around is the NFL draft. Now, of course, we'll talk about the draft in terms of the Buccaneers in that context, but we'll also talk about it through a college football lens. It's not an exclusive NFL show or a generic NFL show, because we talk about the Buccaneers more or less, I guess, together, if you will, the NFL, or they're a part of the show, but they're part of the NFL. But we're both a college football, Marvel, Star Wars show. Of course, we do this show twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Not always live. If we need to, we will have a pre-recorded show. We may have to do that in a couple of weeks or so. But at the moment, things are going mostly pretty smoothly in terms of the live show. No real technical issues. Of course, a big show today on tap for you guys. We'll get started here in about another minute or so. Give some folks time to come in and hang out with us on a Tuesday afternoon, late April. How about that? Got the Twitter pulled up here, making sure folks are aware that we are live. So we may get some new viewers coming in that are listening, if you will. And we'll be starting here now. It is 3:02, so we'll be beginning in 3, 2, 1. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Four Verticals podcast, episode 91 for Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Got a big show for you guys today. Got a lot of major college football topics. Of course, the draft is this past weekend. Teams to believe in is a sort of a segment we're going to bring in here. We'll probably do this again this time next year, but teams to believe in. Got some teams that are sort of flying underneath the radar we'll talk about. Of course, the draft. We'll talk about it from a college football perspective. Not so much I actually just realized we did not record the intro for audio only. So how about that? So just if you're listening to this on the YouTube side of things, ignore this. I've never done this before in terms of messing up like that. But yeah, the audio only version has not started. So excuse me, we are starting over here. So in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to the Four Verticals podcast episode 91. This is the third time, technically second time officially, that I've had to do this intro twice. If you're listening to this on Spotify, kind of ignore this. But if you're on YouTube, you know what I'm referring to, unfortunately. I did not have the audio version recording as I was doing the intro the first time. Anyway, episode 91 here on Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Got a loaded show for you guys. The teams to believe in, teams that I think that are under the radar, if you will, that I think could be pretty good this year. We're covering that. Thoughts on, of course, the NFL draft from a college football perspective. Transfer portal is wrapped up. Got some final thoughts, at least the spring window. Got a lengthy Q&A here. A lot of Marvel-related stuff here. I got a lot of Marvel questions. Got some Superman stuff. Don't think I did not acknowledge the Superman leak that came out. Of course, a very viral tweet, if you will, responding to Josh over at Damn Nerds that a lot of folks are laughing at, but I'll explain that once we get into that, and then I'll go over to Buccaneers draft. the new additions to the team that were made throughout last week and this past weekend. So I got a loaded show for you guys today. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube platform and the podcast feed. That's very important for you guys to do that. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter. We're verified now, as I mentioned in the pre-show. We're verified. Yes, we are a verified account. So if you are, if you haven't joined yet, make sure you join us over there. Got a lot of interactions with you guys. Not to mention the tweet with the response to a tweet from Den of Nerds over there on Twitter. Getting a lot of traction. So a lot of you guys are new here, so welcome in. For listening to this on, again, the YouTube Live after it's done recording, the podcast feed, just make sure, again, subscribe, like the videos, like the podcast on Spotify. I don't need to have notifications turned on, anything like that. I don't do that for myself personally. But look, when you subscribe, I don't knock on the door of your house or show up to your residence or send you emails or physical mail or whatever. I don't call you. Subscribing, all that stuff I just mentioned, keeps this program free. And it just helps us out. Again, we're not putting this behind a paywall or a Patreon or anything like that. So you can rest assured we're not doing that, but it helps us out a little bit. We're growing. We have 5 subscribers. The Twitter followers at 21 right now. Again, we just got verified on Twitter, so it's a big boost for us, and it's going to help out the channel, I think. So, again, loaded show. I'm going to get some water, and then we'll move on here, and then we'll actually start and get into the first topic. All right, make sure things still going pretty smoothly. Put get my notes out, and we will commence here in just a second. Again, never had that issue before where I did not record anything or I wasn't recording anything. I did the intro officially the first time, but anyway, is what it is. So on the first topic and also a programming note, Thursday is going to be our first team projection. Yes, we're finally starting those. May 1st will literally be this Thursday. Team projections. So we're starting it on Thursday. I'm going to tell you guys who the team is. Yeah, you can speculate amongst yourselves, but we will be doing a team projection. So we're projecting your record, not a prediction, just possibilities, right? Scenarios, worst case, best case, most reasonable. We'll choose that for a team. We'll be doing this probably until July, late July or so. I feel pretty good about how that's going to go this time around. And of course, the last time we did this last year, first time we did it, I didn't go over too well necessarily because, late start, the show starting in June and whatnot. It's not the best method of doing it, but I think we're going to make some improvements to it, hopefully, and I feel pretty good about it. Feel really good how that's going to go. But in lieu of that, we did the best non-conference games last week, best non-conference games. Today, that was last show. Today, this show, we're going to be doing teams that you should be, I guess, buying stock in. My notes I have teams to believe in. So just teams that are sort of under the radar or weren't good last year that could be good this year. We'll just see how this plays out. But these are teams that I'm just putting out there, teams that I'm believing in a little bit in terms of next year. So first team up here is Washington. Kellen DeBoer's not there anymore. He's at Alabama. A lot of losses from last year's, drafts, graduation, transfers. It wasn't going to be like that last year. Anyway, regardless of who the coach is going to be for Washington, lose Kellen DeBoer, bring in Jet Fish from Arizona, someone who's very familiar with Washington. NFL experience, yada, yada, yada. Last year was sort of what it was, 6-7. Not great, but there's a lot of things to build on. It's a new staff. Jet Fish, I'm very high on in terms of a coach, what his ability is. Of course, they have new quarterback, feel good about, more of a runner, dual threat type of guy, which helps out, particularly with a roster that's not necessarily up to the standard, if you will, in the Big Ten. And their schedule, of course, we'll do a Washington's record projection down the road, but just a little bit of preview for that. They play G5, an FCS team, Washington State. Kudos for Washington State to continue the Apple Cup series, unlike some other schools who are neglecting their rivals. Then it gets real in a hurry. Ohio State, Michigan at some point, Wisconsin, Oregon, UCLA. So the schedule is pretty tough, but it's not hard. I mean, they avoid Michigan. I mean, they avoid Penn State. They avoid USC. So that's good. That's a good start. But their schedule is the Washington schedule. It's not hard. It's not too easy. It's sort of in the middle. You got some teams that you're reasonably supposed to be near the quality of, or just better than the quality of. So think Maryland, Rutgers, Purdue, UCLA. So those schools, those teams you would expect to compete with in the Big Ten. But Ohio State, Illinois this year, Wisconsin, Oregon. Those are going to be your tough games. And I think Jeff Fish, who I really respect a lot of, heck, Florida fans respect him because they want him to be the head coach of Florida because he has a lot of ties there. I think he graduated from there and didn't play football there, I believe, but he's alumni. But his NFL experience, he's a good coach. A lot of folks, Josh Pate, I spoke to highly of Jeff Fish, and he's a second year, new offensive coordinator. Ryan Walters comes in. Of course, anytime a new staff, you have staff changes. You hire people initially and didn't like them, boot them out. Pretty typical, if you will. And their schedule, well, yes, they don't avoid Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. They do avoid USC. They avoid Penn State. So that's a bit of the silver lining here. And their non-conference is not that difficult. Washington State, whatever, FCS, G5. So, look, it's not a difficult schedule. I think this team, based on what they have coming back, some of the talent they have still there, quarterback, I think could be good for them. It could be a dangerous team here again. Jeff Fish, good, very, very good head coach. Everywhere he's been at, pretty much won. I know the Arizona job he took over was in a portable position after Kevin Sumlin. 1-11's first year, 5-7, and year after that, 10-3. Bull win. Folks kind of forget Arizona when he was there, and that was a very, very good Arizona team. And of course, the coaching change and had to bring in a whole new staff there, and it was what it was. But Jeff Fish, Washington, that's a team I'm buying. I'm buying for sure. Next one, speaking of killing the boars, his new team, Alabama, second year. I feel good about Alabama. I feel really good. Now, look, I'm not predicting them to win the national championship or, go 16-0 and win every single game 100-0. I'm not going to go that route, nor am I going to go the pure negative route and saying, oh, they're going 5-7, 4-8, 3-9, 2-10. They're back to the pre-Saban years. They're not going back to that. I can confidently tell you that's not going to happen. I'll be stunned, if you will, flabbergasted, perplexed if that happened. I think Bama's they're going to be a really good team. Defense is getting older. They had to play a lot of young guys last year. They should be, you're older, you're wiser, used to the system. Quarterback, I think, should be a little bit of an improvement, maybe, which is typical, right? You have a third-round guy and Jalen Milroe going to the Seahawks. You would imagine there should be improvement there, right? Third-round guy, hopefully, you have Ty Simpson, who will be the starter. True freshman quarterback, Keelan Russell. You have Austin Mack, who is still there somehow for some reason, which is good. It's good he's there, but just a lot of folks were thinking he was going to leave, but he didn't. So how about that? But I think Bama, year 2 under on the board. Yes, the schedule's tough again. Of course, it's the SEC schedule this year, same as last year, just the venues change. If you play the team at home, play them on the road, and vice versa. Your non-conference, by the way, is actually pretty difficult. Let me pull this up. So Bama, they play at Florida State week 1, which we know about. So they play Bama week 1. They do play Wisconsin. I believe it's week 3, I believe. I think they have a G5 in between. Yeah, so it's Florida State, Louisiana Monroe in between. Then they have Wisconsin. So within the first 3 weeks, you're playing 2 already really good not like that good, but decent enough major conference teams. You play one of the P2s, one team from the P2, and you play Florida State from the ACC. So, and that's pretty tough. And I've never seen any team, at least outside of your rivals, your out-of-conference rivals, right? With Florida State's Florida, Georgia Tech. I can't recall Bama or any major team doing this where they're playing 2 non-conference, non-rival major conference games, off-conference games. I don't recall Bama ever doing this, at least in my lifetime. They may have done it like in the 70s, but I'm pretty rare to see two high-level non-conference games on your schedule that are actually from big conferences. Well, currently big conferences, right? The ACC, right, as of right now, they're still around. Big Ten, part of the Power 2. Then after that, it gets real in a hurry again with Wisconsin. After Wisconsin, you get a week. Georgia, And then the rest of the schedule, you should know if you're following the team last year or you're a fan of college football, you should know, again, the SEC schedule rotates, or it's the same as last year, just the venues change for conference games. So, again, with Kalen DeBoer coming in, second year, you're not having to scramble like he was last year. And that's one of the things people forget. One of the things people forget is that DeBoer last year was having to scramble. I mean, he comes in, Saban retires. He coached in a national championship game, turns around, gets hired at Bama, brings his family down, his wife, kids. Saban retires. That causes a massive ripple effect in terms of players being able to transfer out, not to transfer in, because the window to sign up was over with because the semester, it started and whatnot. So DeBoer came in last year and he was just sort of had one hand tied behind his back because he was dealing with a roster that was somewhat depleted. It wasn't his fault, and that's just the way of the sport. And it's been like that for the past couple of years, and unfortunately, had to deal with having to hire a staff literally on the fly. Having to maybe I wouldn't say it's like complete chaos, but it was controlled chaos. But I mean, yeah, he came in with disadvantage last year. He came in with the portal. A lot of the guys were leaving. You had to come in and hire new staff and do things pretty quickly. And last year the portal for them, it didn't necessarily work out. And there were some rumors that maybe some guys who were along with Cam Proctor who did come back, maybe you would get some other guys who left who were going to come back. It didn't happen. But Gary Chonak on the board. He's a good coach. He's right for the job. I'm seeing a lot of folks saying, "Oh man, Kalen DeBoer's in the hot seat. He's going to get fired." That's not outside of a complete scandal or them going like 4-8 or 5-7. He's not going anywhere. Even with that, he's not going anywhere. I mean, he's completely fine. He's in the words of he who remains in Loki, and there's no problem with Kalen DeBoer. Now, like, you can be critical of him. You can be concerned, but there's no issue with him. Like there's no overarching, he's going to get fired and, he's on the hot seat. There's none of that. That's not real. And anything, if you're hearing that from anyone, that's coming from a club fly-by casual, frankly, and they don't particularly understand how the sport works. And they all assume it's like the NBA where you can fire coaches after 3 games of the season. You have an interim or literally just hire a new coach for the entire season. That's not college football. That's not how it works. So, Kalen DeBoer, Bama, I think they're really good. They've recruited well. They had the top 5 class this past recruiting cycle. Yes, most players are really young, but I think this year they could be a good team. They can win. Again, the players had last year, a lot of the guys who came back, and look, they didn't lose anyone in the portal either. Like they did a really good job of keeping guys around this time versus last time, which makes sense, right? You have a coaching staff that's been around for now over a year. I expect Bama to do some big things this year. Look, I'm not picking them in the national championship. Spoiler here, I just don't think they're going to. But that doesn't mean I'm picking them to miss the playoff. I think they'll be in the playoff. I guess a spoiler from when we do their record projection. I expect them to be somewhere in that neighborhood. Unlike last year, I think this year you're going to see the real Alabama under Kalen DeBoer. But what was last year was some smorgasbord zombified thing. I don't think we're going to be seeing that again. And I think a lot of folks too, and we'll move on, assume that what you saw last year, what's always going to be. It's not. The world changes. The world's changing right now as I'm speaking. It doesn't sit still. And I think for Bama, and people just assume that Kalen DeBoer is not going to. He's not going to evolve. He's not going to, make some new hires or change some tactics. Of course he's going to. Like, why wouldn't he? If he didn't do that, then he's going to get fired. So I think he's fine. There's nothing wrong. They're going to be okay. They're not going to go 5-7 or 4-8 or whatever people are thinking he's going to do, or 6-7. But no, I'm not saying they're going to go 12-0 in the regular season to beat everyone 100-0. I'm not expecting that either. But somewhere in between that is where I'm thinking they'll be at, and I think some folks will be frankly surprised by that. I don't know what else to say, man. They're going to be a really good team next year, and I think they will prove that pretty early on, I think. Next one here, Texas Tech, Joe McGuire and company. Speaking of teams who have done a really good job of using the portal and using the tools to their advantage and keeping guys around, they've done that. Joe McGuire has done as good as any job in the country, and hasn't had a losing season yet. He's a first-time head coach, at least in the college level. First year 8-5 last year. May have been ahead of the curve a little bit. May have been a little bit too excited. The year before last year was what it was. It got off to a rough start. People wanted him fired after the Texas State game. Like, what? Look, he won 8 games last year, and look what he's doing out there He's doing well in recruiting. He's doing well in the transfer portal. Yes, I know some of that's because they had in the billionaire five, the Fortune 500 guy coming in, and they were having an influx of money and whatever. I mean, that's nothing you can do about that, right? It's the way you play the game. But I think Texas Tech this year, with the talent they have coming in, they brought a lot of guys in for the recruiting portal. Jerry Maguire has been building something up there. They're scheduled to, and I had this pulled up. Have their Wikipedia page pulled up here. Let me get their actual schedules. So they open with a FCS team, G5, Oregon State at home. We'll see, but realistically, you would imagine probably starting 3-0 at Utah. At Utah. That is the game that I am circling if I'm a Houston fan. Not Houston. They do play Houston after that, but as a Texas Tech fan, that to me is a litmus test. It's going on the road and beating a program that's been the model of consistency, at least when they're in the lower Pac-12, and now here they are in the Big 12. I mean, even just in a grander scale, the model of consistency in college football the past 5 or 7 years with with Utah. That'll be a big test for them. But their schedule, notice they avoid a lot of the big players. They don't avoid them. They do have them on the road. So, actually, excuse me on that. But they avoid Iowa State. So that's good. But they unfortunately don't avoid Arizona State and Kansas State on the road. So, I mean, that's going to be very, very difficult to navigate. But knowing Joey McGuire, I know he's not from the program. I never talked to him. But from what I heard of him, listening to guys like Cover 3 and Josh Pate, they feel very highly of him. And in a Big 12 where there's no dominant, keystone species team there anymore, with OU and Texas being not being there anymore, there's a power grab now. And who's there going to be? Right? You've been talking about that. Who's been the power grabber in the Big 12? And I'm not expecting one like annually every single year, but there's some programs to look at. Kansas State, Oklahoma State historically, Kansas, not really, but like Houston, Utah, Arizona State, Iowa State, even West Virginia too, with Rich Rod. So there's opportunities there for Texas Tech. Unfortunately, now I'm looking at it more. It's not an easy schedule. It's manageable, right? I think for a Texas Tech fan, the way, and I'll move on here, the vibe I'm getting here, and this is something that Josh Pate brought up on Sunday, the vibes at Texas Tech, at least to me, from what I'm hearing, is that they are expecting some big things there. They're expecting them to be a potential Big 12 title contender. I know when you hear me say that, when you hear Josh Pate say that in Cover 3, guys at shows like that, you sort of cringe at that because you think of Texas Tech, the last time they won 10 or so games was back when the Big 12 had divisions. Like, that's the last time that happened. They're in the Big 12 South, and that in itself is maybe the best conference division race I've ever seen. And I was young back then, but having, gotten older and watched back some of the old YouTube videos, it's like, man, I wish I had a show back then. Like, that was insane. But yeah, Texas Tech, Oklahoma and Texas, and Oklahoma State in that same division. I mean, the North Division kind of is what it was, and you had Missouri and Kansas a little bit. But, man, that South Division, no Big 12 and had divisions. Whew, and that was the last time Texas Tech was, under the late Mike Leach. That was it. That was like Texas Tech in their prime. Like 07, 08, a little bit after that when Leach left. That was the last time you think about Texas Tech relevantly, though technically the last time they were like quote unquote good was actually 2013, I believe, when they were like undefeated at one point, like 7-0 or whatever. It fell apart. Of course, everyone thinks of Texas Tech now with Mahomes. But before that, I mean, there was Mike Leach and Michael Crabtree and Graham Harrell and the air raid, throw over the yard offense. That's the last time, at least to most people, and the last time they were somewhat relevant was 10 or so years ago in 2013. But the last time they were really, really relevant, considered a national title contender, even a conference contender to a larger extent, or to a more different extent, was 2008. Am I predicting a 2008 type season for Texas Tech? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the folks over there, from what I've heard, they are expecting results. They are wanting returns on investment, right? You bring in the billionaire guy who, kind of jumps into Texas Tech and he's donating a lot of money. You have Joe McGuire who's doing well in the portal, recruiting, top 25 finishes in both, at the very least. They are just respecting some results over there, and they're seeing teams like, Oklahoma State in past years, Baylor in past years, Arizona State last year, just they are just expecting that type of return, and I don't blame them for that, right? If you're seeing those results, you would expect from other schools, you would expect a school like Texas Tech, who is investing, they're doing their own recruiting in the portal. If I were a Texas Tech fan, if I was living in, Laz Buddy, Texas, or that area, right, West Texas, which is an actual town name, Lubbock, San Angelo, those places, Amarillo, Texas, Pampa, Texas, I believe, Pampa or Pampa. If I lived out there when I was a Texas Tech fan, I would expect the same thing. I was an alumni and whatnot. I would expect the same thing. I would expect, based on the fact that you're doing well recruiting, doing the portal, reasonable expectations and reasonable return on investment. So, and look, we'll eventually do them in the preview, record projection and stuff, but I'm telling you guys, Texas Tech, Joe McGuire, they're building something out there, and I know it's hard for me to put it into words and without you guys seeing it, but just go look up Texas Tech highlights on YouTube. Like, just go look up game highlights. I think back to McGuire's first game as a head coach, or one of his first big games was against Oregon. I believe, if I recall, let me go back. That may have been 2022 when they played Oregon. That was Bone X. No, it's not this one. 2023. Yeah, so the second year there, they lost to they lost to Wyoming, and double overtime. And they came back, and everyone thinks I have forgotten about this, but they almost beat Oregon, a team that was very close to being put into the final 14 playoff, and they were a very good team. And I think a lot of folks forget that, how he has gotten this team to perform at a very high level. Of course, they've had some bad losses in between. A 50-point loss to Texas years ago, but they have improved. They have hired new staff, a new coordinator, and new defensive coordinator. But I think in terms of recruiting, being able to get guys back, and we'll speak about one of them here in a minute. But in terms of recruiting, transfer portal additions, they have done a very good job of doing that. And I think if you're a Tech fan, I totally understand why you want to see return on investment. I can understand why you want to see results on the field start to reflect that. So I'm thinking, 10 wins, maybe 9 wins, maybe sneaking into the last year 12-team playoff. I can understand that. So I think you guys will. I think that's a team that I think as long as as the season approaches, I think a lot of you guys will start to learn about that. And I'm just telling you now before the magazine season starts here soon. That's just a team to keep an eye on. Just think about. Clemson's on here. Clemson, of course, Dabo Swinney and company. Been a little bit of under, sort of that underdog role again. Everyone's doubting them. I'm not. I think this team could be their best team in a number of years. Definitely since 2020. They finally used the portal. Dabo, of course, also going outside the Clemson program and actually hiring people and doing actual OC and DC searches, or getting Tom Allen from Penn State, getting Garrett Riley from TCU a couple years ago. And Riley's been there for a long time already. He's been there for 3 years. Of course, Allen just got there. I think this could be a big year for them. Big year for Clemson. Florida State, Miami sort of reloading a little bit. They're having to get new pieces coming in, questions at quarterback. The ACC, real other competitors outside of really Miami right now, and I guess maybe like Syracuse, NC State. But even those, it's like, we'll see. I think Clemson this year, and I agree with Josh, but I don't agree with everything with him. I don't, agree with, using I as a way to make things plural all the times. But I do agree with Josh, and this Clemson team, everything they're doing, the recruiting, finally using the portal, receivers are, who are young last year, a little bit older, Clay Klubnik coming back and not moving on either through the portal or going to the draft. There's just something over there that to me spells out it's real. They're going to be in Charlotte, I believe, for the ACC championship game. A spoiler here. And I think they will be a threat to be a national title contender. I know that sounds crazy. That sounds a bit, pie in the sky thinking, but I'm being serious here. I think, much like how Josh is thinking, Josh Pape, that at the moment, at least going for projecting out, maybe this is the best Clemson team we've seen in a long time, but also might be the last good team we'll see for a while, unless things change in terms of recruiting. And they've I know they're making some waves a little bit. Clemson has in recruiting for this coming up class. This might be their last chance to be at that level they were 7 or 5 years ago. I'm not saying Clemson's going to go like 4-8 or 5-7 after this year, but I'm just saying this is their last good opportunity to at least be somewhat relevant in the national conversation. Now, of course, they'll be relevant on this show because we'll still talk about them, but I applaud Dabo Swinney for making the changes he's making, and I think, well, yes, defensively, you're bringing a new coaching staff there with Tom Allen. It's going to be a tough adjustment. I'm not expecting results to be crystal clear and, be all ironed out. Of course, they do play LSU at home, so week 1, so that's going to be challenging, but I do expect Clemson to be a challenger, and I do believe they are the favorite, too, betting-wise, for the ACC title. So, yeah, I feel good about Clemson, and at least in my opinion, I feel good about them. I don't know about the public. I don't think anyone's really talking about Clemson. If you go ask your buddy, if you're out at the gym or at your local barbecue restaurant, or you're just walking around, and you see someone, you're talking about college football, and you say, hey, what do you think about Clemson? I guarantee you're going to be like, yeah, man, whatever. Dabo's past his time. Miami, go Canes, right? I just don't think folks are really paying attention to Clemson right now. I just feel like that what you saw the past couple of years after 2020, after Trevor Lawrence and all those guys left, I think you've seen some folks look at Clemson and go, yeah, they're still having good years, quote unquote good years, maybe good for Maryland or Arkansas to win 9 or 10 games. And for Clemson, the expectation is not winning 9 or 10 games a year. The expectation is making the playoff and doing some damage. This team, I think, can do that. I know the casual fan, the NFL enthusiasts among us who were on full display this past weekend will disagree with on that. They will tell you that Clemson is done, that Dabo's losing his mind. We'll go look at the draft numbers and whatnot. I don't care. This is a damn good football team, and they will prove a lot of people wrong. Of course, I go and say that, and they prove me wrong. I just feel like they're just as a different team than last year. And I think last year, well, yes, they made the playoff, and yes, everything was pretty good, winning the conference over SMU, yada, yada, yada. This year's team just feels different. By the way, they didn't have last year opportunity. Game against Georgia, neutral side, somewhat a home game for Georgia. Somewhat not a match too, right? Granted, I was sitting here, this time back, back in September of last year saying that I thought that game was going to be pretty close. It wasn't close, but though I was correct in it, the first half was close and it's somewhat competitive. But Clemson gets LSU at home. Don't have to go to neutral site game. Don't have to travel somewhere. It's at home. And this will be that Clemson LSU game, in my opinion, is going to be the biggest game in Death Valley probably in 10 plus years. Probably since that Florida State game, or I guess non-conference wise, maybe that either that Notre Dame game or that Georgia game many years ago. That when Georgia would have been 2013. Notre Dame would have been 2015, I believe, 2015 or 16. Biggest home game, non-conference since then. And this is going to be a huge matchup for them. And in terms of, exposure and it being probably a night game or maybe even 3:30. Hoping not if you're a Clemson fan because it's really, really hot. I can tell you, I can have some confidence in that being, living in the Southeast as well. But, I think Clemson is an under-the-radar team. You're just not hearing a lot about them right now, and I think you should be. And we will. We care. Last one, sticking the ACC, Georgia Tech. Brinke and company. If most of you remember them from that Georgia game last year and the Miami win, they're a team that's also on the rise. And sort of like Georgia Tech, sort of like Texas Tech a little bit too. Ironically, both schools with the name with the word tech in them. Both Texas Tech and Georgia Tech to me are very similar. They're teams that are, you're not hearing a lot about, but I guarantee you, come preview magazine season and come, when also when the college football video game comes out, you're probably going to notice, man, Georgia Tech is a 84 overall and Texas Tech is an 85 overall. Where'd that come from? They're good teams and they have good coaching staffs. And I know they, Georgia Tech locked out on the Willie Fritz sweepstakes, the coach that's at SMU now, and he was at Tulane, and he was in the mix for that job, and he lost out. When they hired Brinke in, a lot of folks were sort of upset about that, and I remember, Josh Pate being, not upset, but kind of disappointed and didn't go after Willie Fritz or made a bigger hire. But I think Brinke's been a very, very, very good coach for them. Emphasizing very there. Extremely good. He's done well in recruiting, keeping a lot of guys around. Yes, I know they lost Singleton to Auburn, but Haynes King is still there, and he wasn't a problem for them last year. And in fact, Haynes King, probably his final year in college, was at A&M, struggled, went through the trials and tribulations of the injury and performance issues. Goes over to Georgia Tech with Brinke, and he's sort of, while he's not lived up to his 5-star rating or whatever, I think he was a 5-star, yeah. coming out of high school, he's gotten a lot better. He's cut down the turnovers. He's operating the offense, not making mistakes. He's using his legs, his actual God-given ability. And I think Georgia Tech and their opportunities. Let me look this up. See here, Georgia Tech schedule 2025. We've done this before. They have a very, very appealing schedule. So they get Colorado on the road. Then they play FCS. Then they play Clemson at home. First conference game for either. Or was I just talking about Clemson? First conference game for each. Clemson, of course, coming off of the LSU game. Regardless of that result, this could be a look-ahead situation. And hopefully for Clemson, it's not, because I feel like Georgia Tech might be a ranked team by then. But just be careful. It's a rivalry game. We've seen Georgia Tech be very competitive in a lot of these games. Georgia game last year and the game against Miami. If you're a Clemson fan, again, just be careful. It's early in the year. It's a sleepy game. I can imagine it probably being a noon game. And just be careful. Take them seriously if you're Clemson staff are watching this. But that's a massive opportunity for Georgia Tech. And, of course, you go through the rest of your schedule, you don't see a Miami on there. You don't see a Florida State. You don't see a Notre Dame, which you would have seen in the past. Very workable schedule. Now, of course, you have some tough games in there. Virginia Tech to a certain extent at in Raleigh, NC State, Boston College. A Southern team going to Boston, Massachusetts, or technically Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, a little bit before Thanksgiving. Not the most ideal thing, but somewhat manageable. And then you get Georgia in a neutral site game in Atlanta, because I guess Bobby Dodd Stam's not good enough to host Georgia anymore. I guess not. But there's opportunities there for them, and their schedule sets up to where they could be a team that could be in Charlotte for the ACC championship game against Clemson. So, not the craziest thing in the world. I mean, their schedule for Georgia Tech, very much so basically the Louisville schedule from a couple years ago and the Syracuse schedule from a couple years ago or last year. That's Georgia Tech this year. This is a Georgia Tech team that, based on their schedule, what they have coming back, you shouldn't be surprised. And I don't want to see anyone come November or October saying, man, Georgia Tech's 7-2 and ranked in the top 15. How did that happen? Well, then go look at the schedule. You shouldn't pay attention. You should have been watching my show and Josh Pate's show and other shows. Any women telling you this, but you didn't. You weren't. Which is why it's important for you guys to subscribe and like the videos and follow us on Twitter and whatnot, because we'll tell you this stuff. We don't hide this stuff behind a paywall, and where I don't force you guys to purchase a textbook. It's not a course or anything I'm offering. It's just a show. But yeah, some teams that keep under under the radar teams I would be believing in. Those are the teams that I think those. How many teams you had on there? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those 5 teams I believe are a little bit under the radar. Teams that I'm starting to believe in a little bit, and I don't really see the college football public talking about them, but the core nerds like me and some others, we are paying attention. And we do know that those teams like Georgia Tech, Texas Tech, Washington, Bama, of course, Bama is obvious one of them in Clemson, but I think those other 3 are ones that I think no one's talking about. But once Preview Magazine season starts and once the video game, this year's edition comes out, you'll probably hear folks talking about it. But to let you guys know beforehand, Georgia Tech, Texas Tech, Washington, those are definitely 3 teams I am believing in a lot more than maybe I would, this time last year. Get some water here. I'll be going 30 minutes, so we're 40 minutes or so. So this is going to be a long show, at least on YouTube. I don't know about the audio only. So we're going to get some water real quick. We'll continue, talk about the draft, final portal thoughts, and we'll move on to Q&A, and we'll wrap it up with the Buccaneers draft. So the NFL draft was this past weekend. Of course, we'll talk about the Buccaneers in terms of the NFL side of things a bit later. But from a college football perspective, I just want to touch on this a little bit quickly here. I've seen a lot of folks talk about the draft and looking at it from an NFL or from a college football perspective. Yes, the Shedeur thing is a big story. Look, I'm not a Cleveland Browns fan. They're not a part of this show. We're not addressing that. Whatever. In terms of the bigger picture, right? You're looking at it from how many draft picks that each conference you get, which players went where, how many, what teams got players selected and whatnot. I think what this draft told you, and really told you 2 things. Number one, the Power 2 is a real thing. I know a lot of folks bring up, including me, the Power 4 and the ACC and the Big 12 are up there with the SEC and the Big 10. It's just not real. It just isn't real. And I think for a lot of folks, and I started to realize this time last year, that this is not the Power 4. It may have been that. It may look like that. It may, aesthetically look like that. You may hear, the head of the playoff committee referred to as the Power 4. It's not. It's the Power 2. We are definitely heading towards a AFC, NFC model in college football. It's just going to happen. Much to my chagrin and much to other chagrins, it's nothing we can do about it. I think this draft and drafts last year and the year before, and really over historically, have shown you that the SEC and the Big Ten have really separated themselves. Now, yes, you can make the argument the top half of the SEC wasn't as good last year. The bottom half was just as equally as bad, but they're still getting draft picks in. Right? Yeah, Texas had a score record. Georgia had a lot of players go in the first round, the first few rounds. Alabama, same thing. We only had one school who didn't put a draft pick in the SEC, being Mississippi State. The real surprise, they were the worst team in the SEC. First time in a long time I can say that. Not being named Vanderbilt, because yes, Vanderbilt did have a player drafted. I believe it was a long snapper or a center, I believe. Where's at the Big Ten? You had Michigan and Ohio State. Ohio State getting close to setting records and stuff, and one of them being a Buccaneers receiver now. But I think it's very much so clear that the Power 2 conference is the Big 2 now, wherever terms you want to use. That's now college football. You can hit it, you can like it. I'm more of the camp of not liking it, but it is what it is. But I think this draft in the years past I've been telegraphing you, at least through the draft selections, how many players have entered in, that the SEC and the Big Ten they're the kings of college football right now. They are the ones who are benefiting off of NIL and the portal and NIL and all this new changes and stuff. That's what it's going to be. I'm not saying the Big 12. I'm going to go. I can say it's a garbage conference. It's not. It's a lot of fun. It's in the ACC, but it's not the same quality. And I think we're also seeing that reflected in the playoff committee. At least their way of thinking, right? With Florida State being snubbed a couple years ago, and I think some of that had to do with the ACC brand and everything. It's the classic, like Greg Sankey was doing on Game Day a couple years ago. If they one of these things, not like the other. It's just what it is. And I think if you're just a fan of the broader world of college football and wanting sort of rooting for the best interest of the sport, like me, this is sad. This is sad. This is very sad. I'm seeing where the sport has divulged to. There's nothing I can do about it, right? I can sit here and talk about it, but I can't. We can't vote on it. We can't we can't help make the decisions, but we can adjust to it. We can adapt to it. But that's one thing that the draft told you. Another thing the draft told you is that star ratings do matter. Now, I know Josh Pate talked about this on Sunday, but I don't think a lot of folks are really talking about this. The stars do matter. The majority of the first-round picks, first couple of rounds, a lot of those guys were either composite 4-star players, 5-star players, one of the two. Like, those are the majority of the players you've seen. I know I've seen the meme of, hey, Cam Ward was number overall pick and is a 0 overall recruit, and then you have DJU from Florida State and Oregon State and Clemson, who was a 5-star top quarterback a couple years ago, and he went undrafted. Yes, that did happen. I'll acknowledge that. Yes, that is what happened. Is that the rule? Is that is that common? Is that something that happens, a lot? Is that something that we have seen, is there historical data of 0 overall players getting to the number overall pick? No, this is very much so an exception to the rule. At least an exception to what we have seen historically. Nothing wrong with Cam Moore being an overall pick. I mean, that's just what it is, right? There's nothing like that. Has nothing to do with star ratings, at least in this case, but most of the time it does deal with it. And look, there can be exceptions to anything. Right? There can be, I can name a whole lot of times where, yes, we expected something to happen, but it didn't happen and something else happened. That's just the way things go. And I think, while those things can sometimes happen, we're still going to have the first few rounds of NFL draft, but we'll still be dominated by Big Ten, the SEC. It's still going to be dominated by 4- and 5-star recruits. I mean, yes, you can say that, hey, the ACC for the first time and, since 10 years ago with Jameis, they had number 1 overall pick at a quarterback. And look, that is true, but that's not the norm. That's not typically where you've seen those players come from. Typically, it's either an SEC player and a Big Ten player. So, or I guess in some other cases, the Big 12. But yeah, I think the NFL draft, what it's if you're looking at it from a college football perspective, I think it does even more now. If you didn't believe it before, you're believing it now. And the fact that it's now the Power 2 is longer really, it's never really has been the Power 4. At least with the Pac-12 going going the way of the dodo bird, it is now the Power 2. That's just they're the kings of college football, if you will. 1A, 1B, SEC and Big Ten. Again, I don't like it. I would much prefer it to be go back in the time machine. Sort of like Back in the Future, going back in time. But we can't do that. And there's I don't have a DeLorean in the parking lot of my apartment complex, but we just have to deal with it. I may not like it, but we can adapt. We can acknowledge it, and kudos to a lot of those coaching staffs in the Southeast and the Midwest who had a lot of players going in. As someone who, look, we're not a exclusively NFL show. We don't talk about other teams besides the Buccaneers, but some of the things about the draft that's been a lot of fun over the years of me watching it is seeing all these guys who I've seen play in college move on, and I think it definitely is a celebration of sorts of these guys that I followed for a number of years, regardless of how they got there, right? Transfer portal and whatever. It's still satisfying to see these guys, these players, who I've followed since recruiting through college. Now here they are going to the pros. I'll be seeing them probably facing against the Buccaneers, right, on Sundays down in the fall, and also in late winter, or I guess early winter. But just some things from the college football perspective, if you will. The NFL draft. Into some other bigger topics and stories that have been hot topics over the past couple of days or so, but there are other places you can go for that. It's some of those talking points have been exhausted. I'm not talking about that here. You can go watch other shows for that, but just some thoughts on the draft from a cultural perspective. Quick little other segment here. Transfer portal is over. The transfer window for the spring, so we'll sort of go over the final. Whoa, burp there. Final class listing, if you will, for transfer classes, and it's pretty interesting here. Very reflective of where I think this season's going to go. So going all the way from 1 to 10 in order. 1 LSU, 2 Texas Tech. Just talked about Jordan McGuire. I'll stop on LSU for just a second. LSU did some work in the portal, man. 11 4-stars, 3 5-stars, number 1 class. Unlike last year when LSU, fumbled the bag a little bit, weren't able to get a lot of key players. Brian Kelly and that NIL collective down there are not messing around this time. They did not screw around. They put their fists down. They got to work, and it's it paid off in terms of the players they got. We'll see what the results on the field say. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I think LSU will be really, really, really good this year, especially with Nussmeier coming back and the talent they got from the transfer portal, which is not a guarantee, but from what I'm thinking and the confidence I'm hearing from several people I've listened to, I feel pretty good about LSU being a team that could be showing up in Atlanta in December. Texas Tech, we just talked about them earlier. I'm really, really expecting some big things from them. Ole Miss, once again, Lane Kiffin and company going big in the portal. Miami, ditto. Of course, you got Carson back and some other new additions. We'll see about the health of him come fall. Oregon, talked about Dan Lanning and company. This will be their first year, and in a larger sense of having mostly recruits from him purely, so not having to rely on transfers all that much. But he's still getting guys. It's a smaller class out of all the top 10, right? Only 10 guys. But still, Dan Lanning and company using the portal. We'll see how they perform. He's been very selective on what players he wants. But I think the more, with Oregon this year, I think it is going to be more us finally seeing what a Dan Lanning team looks like with like 95% his people. So I'm saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a good thing either, but just putting it out there. Florida State, look, they had to take in a lot of players in the portal after what happened last year, sort of replenishing the roster. Of course, you bring in Gus Malzahn, so of course you bring in KJ Castellano, and have to bring in a whole new quarterback. But in terms of rating the class or listing it, and they fell in the top 10, so golf clap for Mark Norvell. Missouri, Elijah Drinkwitz. How about that? Top 10. People forget about them too. They had a really good portal class, and everyone can have their own opinions on Missouri and Drinkwitz. That's going to be a very good team as well. Yes, the schedule's going to be what it was, sort of similar to what it was last year. I believe they get Bama at home, so raising eyebrows there. So, again, another good portal addition, or another good class to add on to the players they've had already via recruiting and other means. Auburn as well, very, very, I'm going to say they didn't go like full money cannon into the portal. I think it was certainly a case for Auburn this year that the certain pieces they wanted in the transfer portal, mainly referring to quarterback and receiver, weren't necessarily. I guess receiver of Singleton was there, but in terms of big time quarterback, let's be real, wasn't there. And I think a lot of Auburn folks are, I'm not concerned, but just disappointed they didn't get the big flashy, golden quarterback. But they got Jackson Arnold. We'll see. Also got some good pieces on other spots that were deficiencies for them last year. North Carolina, Bill Belichick. Look, I know he's in the news for other stuff with that interview this past weekend on the CBS morning, Sunday morning. But besides that, top 10 recruiting class, top 10 portal class for Mr. Belichick, first year in college. That's pretty good, I think. They needed some players to come in. Had to take in a lot of guys, 30 commits. Kentucky, same thing with Missouri. Kind of gets forgotten here a little bit with Mark Stoops and company. 22 commits, a lot of 3 stars, several 4-star commits. So your top 10 here, some reasonable, or at least teams you'd expect to be up there. But the ones that are probably going to be surprising you if you're looking at this here, I'm using a 247 by the way. Definitely Missouri, definitely Kentucky, definitely programs a little bit shocking in terms of you expecting them to be there. So how about that? Let's see, there's another stuff here. Yeah, that's it for the main topic. So I'm going to get some more water. We've been going for a while. I didn't realize we're going this long on YouTube. Let me check the recording here on. Okay, so around 50 minutes on the actual audio-only version. So get some water here. We're still not, the show's not done with. We still have a long ways to go. But I got a little bit of Q&A, some rapid-fire Q&A. We got some Bucs draft thoughts, and we'll wrap it up. So. So for Q&A, got mostly not really college football related, mostly Marvel and some DC stuff regarding the Superman. But we got Marvel questions here in the first 3, and we'll go through these pretty quickly. First one, why is Marvel's What If series getting a bad rap? Like, why was it considered pretty terrible? So this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while. I just haven't gotten to it. So Marvel, they put out the What If series a couple years ago. It's the animated show that does dive into multiverse stuff, but kind of played it safe, relative to what they had available to them in terms of characters to use and scenarios. It was very not the show they were, at least we were pitched to, at least us fans. It was sort of devolved into a Captain Carter, more, I don't know, geared show. Look, I'm not going to sit here and, get mad at the writers or the people behind this show, or even some of the voice actors too. Like, I'm not here going to bash on Haley Atwell. From what I've heard, she's a great person, good actress. I just don't know if this show, at least from me as a Marvel fan who saw this show initially and was, I like the idea of it, right? You're doing multiverse stuff, right? You originally brought in Kang the Conqueror, now it's Doctor Doom. The promise was with the multiverse stuff. And look, I know a lot of folks don't like it. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's kind of cool to kind of go into this real, the time travel stuff and whatnot. You had some good ideas, or at least the idea of having a What If show, because it was a thing in the comics. It just wasn't executed very well. It just, I don't know, it was bogged down. You had some good episodes, right? The Doctor Strange episode in season 1. Season 2, kind of the same thing. Had some selective episodes that were good. Season 3 was abysmal. It was just complete crap and just terrible. Just, I don't know, man. It just wasn't for me. And look, I'm not bashing the people behind this show or even the actors or actresses behind it. It was not a good show. And I think a lot of folks were just disappointed with it. And look, there's nothing wrong with me being disappointed. It's another thing about, being nasty towards like the criticism stuff. I don't necessarily advocate that. But I do advocate for constructive criticism. And I'll just say, this What If show just wasn't what I think us, the fans, wanted it to be. And I think to a certain extent, I think the folks over at Marvel get that. I think Kevin Feige and company get that. I think they understand that this was a missed opportunity, which is why you are seeing, Doomsday and Secret Wars being sort of what we wanted the What If show to be, what we wanted it to be, and I think actually more to a bigger extent, the Fantastic Four movie, right? It's an alternate universe, alternate Earth. That's what we wanted What If to be like, and unfortunately, they didn't really do that. It just turned into a very, like, I don't know. I don't even know what it was. Like, the first season was a good promise. Later two seasons where it's like, okay, it's a storyline, it's a continuing storyline versus what we thought it was going to be, which is like a new story every single week, and it was never going to be like a reoccurring, like wasn't going to have a lot of recurring actual characters and whatnot, but whatever. But yeah, the What If show, look, there were some good moments in it, but largely I think will be probably forgotten. I think, and who knows, maybe in 10 years or so we will appreciate it for what it was, but I don't know, man. It didn't have the same oomph as we wanted it to. Like, it didn't have the same oomph as Multiverse of Madness, or even what I believe, of course, Doomsday and Secret Wars will give us, but even not in the same oomph as I believe the Fantastic Four movie will give us. So, I don't know, just disappointed. Some good moments, but I don't know. I just cannot fathom how poorly fumbled the bag, or how poorly Marvel had fumbled the bag on that show in particular. It still boggles the mind how that even happened. Next question here: where are the other X-Men characters in Doomsday? So this is another question too. And of course, of Doomsday, they started officially filming, even though they were supposed to be filming a long time ago, but issues of production, getting people coming in, and apparently there's some script issues, which is no surprise. Yes, if it was a different studio not named Marvel, who traditionally has, last minute rewrites to scripts, I would guarantee you this would be the top story on news outlets like Variety and Hollywood Reporter. So, look, I think it's okay. I don't think anyone should be too worried. Yes, they are starting a bit later, but we'll see. But anyway, with the X-Men being in there, we've had a lot of the main actors coming back with Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen. Trying to think who else is in there. I know the actor who plays Cyclops, Mystique, Nightcrawler. I forget that. I think I know it's James Marsden as Cyclops. I forget the other actors and the actors who plays Mystique. But anyway, this is besides the point. Those are all returning, and of course we had Hugh Jackman come back as Wolverine for Deadpool and Wolverine. So everyone's asking, where's everyone else there? Where's Halle Berry as Storm? Where's Anna Paquin as Rogue? Where's Hugh Jackman as Wolverine? And I think a lot of folks were sort of expecting that once, the stupid announcement Marvel did a couple weeks ago where they had the freaking 5-hour-long video with the chairs. Once you got to the X-Men characters, and I also forgot Kelsey Grammer as Beast. Once we got to those names, we were saying, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, Hugh Jackman, Anna Paquin, those people were returning, and we didn't get that. None of their names were included. Here's what I'll say, and we'll make this kind of short. Nothing's guaranteed, or nothing is guaranteed in terms of those characters coming back. Sure, it's likely, right? There's certainly a good chance, but from what I'm hearing from guys like, Joshua Damn Nerds and the Twitter leakers and scrippers, there's a low chance that you'll see, Storm and Rogue and those characters. It's the chances of them come back are low, and it's for multiple reasons, right? Maybe it's scheduling issues, maybe especially with Anna Paquin, who, by the way, that whole situation with Days of Future Past, with the Rogue character being out of the actual theatrical version, and had to release a whole new version for home release, or another version, and that I really do think that whole experience is probably why she's probably not coming back. But who knows? As AC/DC says, money talks, and maybe they back up the Brinks truck for her, and maybe she comes back. But none of those other actors or actresses they're not guaranteed. And I think a lot of folks are hoping they can come back. It'll be great, but it's not guaranteed. And I think with Doomsday, right, because you have to understand, Disney going to have to manage the budget here, right? And can't put everyone in the movie, but they can still be in it. But from what I'm gathering, if you were fans of those X-Men movies back in the early 2000s, hearing a lot of those actors and actresses come back, and from what I'm hearing from a lot of these leakers and skippers, at least what they're sort of not reporting, but just sort of hinting at, is that it's very unlikely that everyone's come back. Yes, it sucks, but they could appear in Secret Wars. Is that it? That certainly seems like the route they're going, or Marvel's probably going to go really, money cannon in, with getting people to come back. And look, I could be totally wrong here, and those characters could show up in Doomsday, and they very well could, but I'm not too confident. I'm not too sure they will be coming back. And look, I could be sitting here and the first teaser trailer comes out and everyone's back and we see, when they go to the X Mansion, which by the way will be in the movie because there have been set leaks that have shown that, and we see all the characters and all the actresses and actors back, and it's everyone's all back. That could be totally happen. But what also could totally happen is the amount of characters that have been, or at least the actors and the characters that have been announced. That's it. So I know it sucks for those fans who were fans of those original 3 movies, but again, Marvel has a budget. They can't be, they can't be writing checks they can't pay. And I think it's obvious that, we can't put everyone in the movie. We're putting the important, at least the important characters, at least the actors and actresses are willing to come back. Last question here. Thunderbolts concerns. And I think we'll probably do, and of course, the movie comes out this week. I'll be seeing it along with you guys on Friday, I think. The reviews are coming out. Rotten Tomatoes score pretty good, right? 90s, the highest rated Marvel film in half a decade, which is a definition of insanity. That's been that long. The reviews that have been coming out, I think pretty good, very, very positive. Though, much like Joshua Van Nerds, I still fully agree with him and a lot of the reporting that's been out there that the movie is just not, there's not a lot of hype. And sure, the Rotten Tomatoes score will help, but it's not going to do, I don't expect it will be helping that much. I do expect this to probably still fall in the realm of flopping. It's not going to be like a Marvels or a Ant-Man the Wasp, Quantumania, where it's going to be a total, they lost a lot of money, but it's not to that level, but it's still going to, if you're Marvel and Disney, it's going to hurt that this will probably not make a lot of money. And look, I'm hoping it's going to. I think the movie's going to be really, really good. I think from what we're hearing, it's very positive. And yes, we've already addressed the leaked post-credit scenes, and now you're starting to see the footage on Twitter now. And yes, I've watched it. It's very exciting. But from what I'm hearing, and this is a concern here, and this may be a reason why it's tracking so low, is that the reviews are mentioning this sort of mental health thing. And look, it's if you've been paying attention to leaks and scoops, you know what this is referring to. I'm not going to go with that here because it's a spoiler, and 2, it's if I wanted to, which I kind of wanted to, but we've been going for a while. For the sake of time, yes, the mental health is part of the film. Is that necessarily going to stick to the normies, like the normal general public? Like from Jeremy from, I don't know, Powell, Wyoming. Is he going to go see Thunderbolts, and it's going to be a very much more grounded character study film? I don't know if he's going to enjoy that. I think Jeremy would much rather go watch a movie where it's a lot more action, but I don't know. It's not a concern. It's just a curiosity of how is that handled. Is it actually good for us who actually do care about this movie and actually will go and see it regardless? But, we'll see. Last question here in the Q&A. Superman leak, and how bad is it? Yeah. So this popped around. This popped around a couple yesterday. Yeah. So I tweeted out, and Josh at Den of Nerds tweeted this out yesterday. His sort of initial reaction. He talked about it on the stream earlier. I sort of did a little cheeky tweet response to him, reply, and it's the we're so that's the we are so back, it's so over chart that's been floating around the past couple of years. It's the meme. So sort of in my tweet, I was like, yeah, this is Josh's, relationship with this movie, even though it's not come out yet. Superman. And that's, we're so back, it's so over. We're so back, it's so over. It's over, we're back. That's sort of in my journey to this movie. So what am I referring to here? What's this link that's been going around? So this has been confirmed, and also it's been going around like Reddit and places like that. And I think a lot of those scoopers are saying, yes, this is real. At least it's a idea that's been floating around, and it's true. So the basis of the leak here, and I don't really care in terms of spoiling this because I'm pretty sure this is in the movie. But it's dealing with sort of Superman, David Cornsweet, being tied into some, anti-Superman stuff on social media. And you're going to see, I guess, like the hashtag super shit. And apparently it's mutant monkeys on keyboards from Lex Luthor. Yes, it sounds bizarre. Does it sound very much so James Gunn? Yes. Look, on paper, this sounds stupid. I totally agree. It's just, it is just, I don't know. It just sounds weird. But if you think about it, and this is something that Josh did on this stream earlier, Den of Nerds, that if you combine this, which this is probably true, and you combine it with the other leak that's been going around about, the Kryptonians and Jor-El being more imperialists, and the reason why Superman Kal-El is actually on Earth is to conquer Earth and make it another part of the Empire. This kind of makes sense if you look at it. If you combine this leak and the other leak, that it sort of makes sense why people would turn on Superman. But it doesn't make sense because why would Lex Luthor have mutant monkeys or whatever that means? And I don't know, man. Like this on paper, it sounds stupid. Of course, what this is referring to, and I think Josh mentioned this earlier, is that this is referring to James being fired from Disney and sort of the backlash that was received from that. Look, man, this could be gold. This could totally work in the movie. We've seen stuff. For example, I've always used this example in past shows about, back when Endgame was coming out, and we got the plot leaks and stuff about Professor Hulk and Fat Thor, and everyone was like, man, losing their minds, going insane, and then the film comes out, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this totally works, right? Doesn't sound as bad as it did on paper. This could be that. This could be a classic scenario of, man, this sounds really stupid on paper, and then all of a sudden we see it in theaters, and it's like, oh, okay, sure, it's still weird, but I guess it's not as bad. But I guess some other things too of this movie. And look, again, I'm still excited for this. I'm still going to try and see it. But it's just, while there's a lot of good things, like the CinemaCon footage, the footage that was released a couple weeks ago, and there's been a lot of good things, but there's also been a lot of bad things, like some of the leaks. And I'll also put the Jor-El stuff in the positive, so I do agree with Josh or Jennifer. That's kind of cool. It's a spin, it's a retcon that kind of works, right? It's a little bit different, but just the fact that we're getting this leak and some other stuff's been going around, the fact that it's supposedly Guardians of the Galaxy Superman, which, look, I like the first Guardians movie. The second one, I'm sorry, I'm in the minority. I don't like it. I think it's too much of a comedy. Not to mention, too, the fact that we've had a lack of dialogue in the promotional material. That's, bright lights and sirens. That's, I don't like that. And not to mention, too, the fact that they've had to hire the marketing guy from Marvel and had to come over and sort of, fix this. So, I don't know, man. Look, does it sound stupid on paper? Yes. Could it work in the theaters? Could it actually work on screen and it actually somehow work somehow while it's still weird? Of course it could. And look, I'm not rooting for this film to fail. I think what James and them are doing, yes, they're making some changes. Yes, they had to bring in a marketing guy to polish up some stuff. And they're, yes, the test screenings have been mixed. But look, at the end of the day, as long as the movie is good and serviceable and it makes them a lot of money, because supposedly the film's suit is going to fold over if it doesn't, which is real, by the way. That's not just me saying that. That's a lot of reputable people have been saying that Warner Brothers is really, this is important for them. That's all they need. It just needs it. They needs to make a lot of money. Can at least just be a reasonably good James Gunn film. That's all we're asking. And it's worrisome when you're hearing stuff like this and there's no dialogue being released. And it's like, I don't like this. It doesn't feel good. At least doesn't give me hope, if you will. But we'll see. One last thing here. As per usual, with the Buccaneers, they're usually towards the end of the show. They're not a main feature. It's another thing against the Buccaneers. I'm a Bucs fan, by the way, too. But in order of the show, they're not really the main topic here, which is mostly college football. But Buccaneers draft. I will say this up front. Very happy. This was a very good draft. And I think if you're a Bucs fan, you've been following the team for a while like me, over 10 years, not surprised, right? Tampa, Jason Light, the general manager, has done a phenomenal job. He's one of the best when it comes to drafting and management and stuff like that, evaluating players. Very good. I mean, there are selections here, if you've forgotten. We'll start from the 7th round to the 1st round. Tez Johnson, Oregon, wide receiver. Him and Bo Nix are buddies in college. Good pick. Do I expect Tez Johnson, by the way, to be like a starter day one against whoever we're going to play? No, but good depth. Elijah Roberts from SMU, good player. David Walker from FCS team. Outside linebacker, 4th round. And once you get towards like the 5th round, after the 5th, from between round 1 and round 5, I think it's where you're going to see the actual impact players. Like Tez Johnson, he may or may not be on the roster come week 1. So we will see. But still, if you're waiting for depth purposes, that's good. Or in words of Josh Payne, if you believe in the adding eye in the stuff, perp eye, but I see purposes. So now you get into round 3, Jacob Parrish from Kansas State. Good player, good corner. These top 2 here with Abuka and Morrison, these are really good. I think Morrison, to me, is actually the more important one here. Now, Emeka Ibuka is good, too, and that's a really good pick. But Morrison, had injury stuff in Notre Dame. He didn't play a whole lot last year. Knowing Marcus Freeman, having seen a lot of his teams in the worst following college football, I feel good about this pick. Morrison's a good player. Of course, his reaction on draft day was pretty cool to watch. Him being pretty emotional and knowing that Todd Bowles and them really thought highly of him. So that's a good pickup for Bowles and company. Of course, they didn't have a pick in the 6th round because of the whole Carlton Davis trade. But the one that I think everyone's excited about in the update, including me, and not to mention shocked, was the wide receiver, Ibuka from Ohio State, Emeka. As I mentioned on, I believe actually last Thursday we were doing the preview, this was a name I was hearing a little bit about, Ibuka's name being mentioned for Tampa, and here they are. I know this was a shock for a lot of people. I know a lot of folks wanted, Walter Nunn and Mike Green. We talked about that last Thursday, but them going receiver here with Ibuka, smart. Very smart move. And I think the reasoning for this, you have Mike and Chris. You're getting older. Of course, Chris with injury stuff, Mike just age. Getting a bit older. You need to get weapons around Baker, surely for depth purposes. Of course, the past couple of years, you've had Trey Palmer, and then last year, McMillan. McMillan's been good. Palmer, he's okay. He's fine. I know a lot of folks are down on him, especially in the Bucs realm. He's okay. He's not gonna be like all-time favorite player or anything, but he's not a shitty crapper player either. He's good. Now is he the same level as like McMillan or Emeka Ibuka? No, but with Ibuka coming in, of course he wasn't the first receiver taken. Of course that was McMillan, but if you're going through the character stuff and Ibuka being having the least character flaws out of all the first round draft picks, at least one of them, smart kid. I've watched a lot from Ohio State. Has a lot of records here, and you can imagine. Or just these thing about this too. It's like Ibuka when he was there. You had Jeremiah Smith there last year, Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, a lot of these all-time favorite Buckeyes players, wide receivers, and guys like Brian Hartline, who best receivers coach at least in my lifetime. And geez, and the players he's put out in the first round, what's up with that? But this is a good pick. I know a lot of folks are mad that didn't go defensive, and look, I was expecting that too. I was expecting Tampa and Todd Bowles to go defensive, which is his specialty. But internally, when this pick was made, I'll be honest with you, I was, yes, this is what I wanted. Yes, I wanted another receiver to let me eventually get to Mike and Chris moving on. Of course, next year, I think we will also go receiver too, more than likely. They need help there. And I think whether it's for trade or getting guys in the draft, this is a good start for that. Yes, it's not, it's not always the surefire thing to get a receiver in the first round. We've seen a lot of players not pan out there, at least thus far. But having watched Ohio State, of course, as a college football fan, this is a good pick. I feel really confident about it. And I am very excited to see what he can bring. I think he'll be very productive, too, especially with Chris and Mike being your two best receivers, and especially Mike Evans. This opens the door for not only Ibuka, but also guys like McMillan, guys who are someone like him, that type of caliber player as well, to help get him open and have him be more of a contributor as he was last year. So overall, I think this draft outfit should grade it. I think an A- is pretty good. Now, yes, if they went defensive, I think it would have been A+, but I think A- here, fairly good. And I feel very, very confident that this could be a really good draft class for them. And once again, Jason Light hitting out of the park again. He has been a godsend for Tampa. Yes, they've had some issues with their Roberto Aguayo stuff and him not panning out, and some other guys like Vernon Hargraves and whatnot. But for the most part, every single pick they've had, even guys are not there anymore, like Carlton Davis. Good for Tampa. And look, it's sad he's leaving, but of course we don't really talk about him that much. But he was a good player for them. Jamel Dean, good player. Yes, they've had some other issues too with Joe Tryon. He's not on the team anymore. He's left. He's long gone now. But even with the guys that have left, they still had moments of success. And I think that's important for any general manager that's been around for 12 or 10 or plus years. Right, Jason Light, been there for a decade. So Tampa, A- draft. I think it's really, really good. Some good selections. And of course, everyone's going to make it. Of course, they had some undrafted free agents. I have Deion's other kid, Shiloh, but we'll see. This is I feel very confident. And of course, we'll get the schedule release next week, I believe, or in a couple weeks. So we will discuss that again. Our reaction to that. It'll be a Thursday show. But speaking of Thursday, that's when we will see us again. long show. Gotta get out of here. Got to get this up on the podcast feed too. Until Thursday, we'll have our show as usual. We will, of course, be doing our record projections starting on Thursday, May 1st. So it's coming. It's coming pretty soon. College football season. So until then, take care. We'll see you on Thursday, and we'll be back here at sometime. We'll let you guys know, but take care, and we'll see you. We'll see everyone on Thursday.